Dan Lanning and this Oregon team and this Oregon program right now continues to pave a lot of new paths. One might say they continue to blaze a lot of new trails in Eugene, Oregon right now, and they seem to be accomplishing a lot of best evers, whether it's on the field, whether it's recruiting classes as well. But there's one position group that at Oregon is certainly taking a step up and a jump up into an elite level status in college football. And man, that is the tight end position. The past, the recent past, the present, and the future is absolutely stacked at the tight end position for the Oregon Ducks. Now, before you talk about the present, that being the upcoming 2025 season, before you talk about the future, you got to talk about the groundwork that was laid the last handful of seasons by one of the best, going to go down as one of the all-time best Oregon tight ends in history, that being our boy T-Ferg, that being Terrence Ferguson. When you look at his numbers and how he stacks up, and when you look at Oregon tight ends of the past, to me, I think the battle for the best Oregon tight end of all time is between him and Ed Dickson, who played in the late 2000s for this Oregon football program. Terrence Ferguson, the all-time leader in receptions from a tight end with 134. He is also the career leader in receiving touchdowns from a tight end with 16. He's tied for first with Ed Dickson himself for single-season receptions. Actually, the interesting thing about that is Ed Dickson and Terrence Ferguson are both 1-2, so they both have 2 seasons that are right there, that those offenses in those 2 separate eras really look to get those guys the football. So 42 catches one year for both of these guys, 43 catches another year for both of these guys as well. Fergie, second in single season receiving yards. He had 591 yards this past season. Second in career receiving yards. That's actually just 20 yards, just a measly 20 yards behind Ed Dickson. Terrence Ferguson is a prime example of Duck development. He came in as a Mario Cristobal recruit. He stayed when Dan Lanning became the head coach, and I'm sure he knows that that is an extremely smart decision. And the thing I like about Terrence is it's kind of this newer wave, more athletic, certainly type of tight end that you're seeing a lot more in college football. And because of that you're seeing a lot more in the National Football League as well. You saw Terrence Ferguson line up in the slot. You saw him really work the middle of the field. You saw him maybe do more than your traditional tight end type of position. 3-point stance right next to the offensive tackle. But I talked about at the beginning of this segment, Terrence Ferguson is laying the groundwork. And for as much more and as maybe more diverse that Terrence Ferguson was to maybe other tight ends in the past, not only in Oregon history, but in all of college football, the Ducks are taking it to another level this year with one Kenyon Sadiq. I've talked about on this show how much I love Kenyon Sadiq and how good that I believe Kenyon Sadiq is going to be this season for the Oregon Ducks. But you don't have to take my word for it. Pro Football Focus has a similar type of feeling. They recently came out with the top rated tight ends going into the 2025 season. They had Kenyon Sadiq at number 6. And considering who was above him on that list, I actually thought Kenyon was a little bit underrated. Can you tell that I'm excited about 18 in green and yellow? He had an 80.9 Pro Football Focus grade, which was ranked 9th amongst tight ends. That was last season when he was the backup to Terrence Ferguson. And I've raved about the athleticism. I've raved about the speed compared to maybe who he's lined up against and the matchups that they're lined up against and the versatility that Kenyon Sadiq has at this position. And I'm going to continue to rave about that. But why he is maybe the ultimate combination at the tight end position is that, of course, combined with his ability as a run blocker. Sometimes when you get a tight end that's ultra athletic and is a lot more involved in the passing game and he's quick and he can be very versatile and very diverse in an offense, a lot of times they're not the best blockers in the world. That's not the case with Kenyon. It's not the case with Kenyon Sadiq. He was one of 2 tight ends that earned a top 15 grade from PFF as a receiver and a run blocker as well. So he's really the complete package. And I think what you saw with Terrence Ferguson, the versatility and the diversity, I think you're going to see just a little bit more. And we've seen it. We've seen him involved in the run game. We've seen him lined up in the backfield. We've seen him lined up in the slot. We've seen him lined up out wide, traditional tight end position. I think you can do so much with Kenyon Sadiq. And I think Kenyon Sadiq is going to be a more targeted weapon for this Oregon offense this season. The reason I grew up, I played tight end. I played defensive end. So you can certainly maybe hear my voice get a little bit more excited when I talk about a great tight end like Kenyon Sadiq. I think the reason that I love a great, versatile, athletic type of tight end, whether it's Terrence Ferguson, whether it's Kenyon Sadiq, whether it's someone that we're going to be talking about here in the future, because we know Tracktown USA has the speed on the boundary. We know we've got Evan Stewart. We know we've got Decorian Moore. We know we've got Jeremiah McLeod. We know we've got this speed. Oregon is always going to have the speed out on the perimeter. But when you look at the matchups in the middle of the field specifically, a lot of times it's finding the hole in the zone. You're matched up against a linebacker. Maybe you're matched up against a nickel. Maybe you're matched up against a safety. When you combine the speed, when you combine the size with someone like a Sadiq or some of these tight ends that are playing at Oregon, it is such a matchup mismatch. When you match up Sadiq, maybe he's from like a slot position against, if you match him up one-on-one against a linebacker, he's going to win it with his speed. You match him up in the red zone against a nickel or a safety, he's going to win that battle with his size. There always seems to be a little bit of a mismatch when you have a good, big, athletic tight end in the middle of the field. Now, we talk about the athleticism, we talk about the versatility of someone like Kenyon Sadiq, and he is going to get a lot of praise from me. He already has. But there's another guy on this room that maybe as we get closer to spring, maybe as we get closer to fall, might be a little bit overlooked in the grand scheme of things, and it's a transfer coming in from Louisville by the name of Jamari Johnson. 2023, coming out of high school, he was on the 24/7 All-Freaks list, 6'5", 265 pounds, and this guy can move. This guy can move as well. I think maybe between the 20s, in the middle of the field on Oregon drives next season, you're going to look for the Kenyon Sadiqs of the world. You're going to look for, not of the world, you're going to look for Kenyon Sadiq, certainly himself. And I think he's going to be a top target amongst the Decorian Moores, amongst the Evan Stewarts in this passing game for the Ducks next season. But I think when you get down to the red zone, I think when you get to someone like Jamari Johnson, like everybody's talking about a lot of weapons, the Super Frosh, Evan Stewart, Kenyon Sadiq, and I'm going to continue to talk about them. But I just have a feeling, I think sometime there's going to be situations, I think in 2025, where Oregon brings in a two tight end set. Maybe they throw Kenyon Sadiq in the slot, and then maybe Jamari Johnson is at the typical Y position next to the offensive tackle, and he's the guy they get the football to. Very similarly, like Kenyon Sadiq, and maybe some situations in 2024 with Terrence Ferguson on the field, certainly as well. That's the recent past. That's the present. But boy, the future is awfully, awfully spicy at this position. So you've got Ferguson. And then of course you've got Kenyon Sadiq and Jamari Johnson. If we do get just 1 year of Kenyon Sadiq, and I think we could very possibly see that if he has a really big year, he'd go out to the NFL. I think Jamari Johnson could create a bridge to these guys from the 25 class and the 2026 class as well. We start with 4-star Vander Plug. For the longest time, he was a commit to Washington, and he flipped over to the Oregon Ducks. Now, when you look at some of these guys that we've talked about with the height, with the size, with the Fergusons, with the Sadiqs, with the Jamari Johnson, Vander Plug, as of right now, maybe doesn't have that size that some of these other guys do. He's got the height, 6'6", but some people throwing him around 210 pounds, others maybe throw him at around 220 pounds. If he wants to play and really fit in to this role that Oregon tight ends have been able to fit into, I think he needs to spend a couple of years really working on his upper body and certainly gaining some weight. But then I kind of look at it, and considering some of the other guys on this list that in the 26 class, I think fit more into the traditional tight end role, maybe you could see Vander Ploeg really pivot to a big wide receiver type of role. Either way, I think Vander is going to find himself an opportunity to get on the field in the coming years for the Oregon Ducks. But man, I raved over Terrence Ferguson to start this thing as maybe the best tight end in Oregon history. I think Kenyon Sadiq is going to take it to another level, but Kendra Harrison, he's currently committed to Oregon. And according to some recruiting folks out there, he's trying to get to Eugene as much as he possibly can. And he lives all the way on the other coast. He's all the way from North Carolina. But he's a top 15 player in the 24/7 Sports Composite. 6'7", 245 pounds. And not only is he good news for Dan Lanning in Eugene, he's good news for Dana Altman because he is also an Oregon basketball commitment as well. When you have tight end also combined with being a great basketball player, at that size, that's a guy that can go up and grab some rebounds. That's a guy that can go up and get the football in a red zone type of situations. 24/7 Sports called him a once-in-a-decade player at this type of position. His size, and man, this guy runs like a deer. Like, he is a weapon that I am so excited about once he eventually gets on campus. And then you look at some of these other 2026 tight ends as well. Like, you got the number one player that's already committed, and then you've got two players in the top 5 in the 26 class, according to 24/7 Sports, at the tight end position, that are big-time targets for the Oregon Ducks, and Oregon is contenders for both of these guys. I said in the show before, that was not the only time there was not just one time that I was going to be talking about the Mater Dei pipeline and connection. We got another one here in Mark Bowman. And then there are other connections with Brock Harris that is playing high school football within the state of Utah. He is a Portland native. Now, kind of like the quarterback situation that I laid out with Jared Curtis and Jonas Williams, I personally do not foresee both of these tight ends, being in this class in 2026. I just think, the schools that are going after these guys and the talents that both of these guys are, considering, you've already got Kendra Harrison committed in this class. I just don't see both of them coming. And I tend to favor Brock Harris, who is the number 5 tight end in this particular class. Mark Bowman is the number 2 tight end in this particular class. But if your consolation prize is that you sign the number 1 tight end and the number 5 tight end in a given class instead of number 1 and number 2, you're doing it right, and kids are flocking to the flock in Eugene more than ever at the tight end position.